Welcome back to today's video. Today is Monday, September 15th, 2025, and today we are going to be talking about Representative Thomas Massie from Kentucky's 4th Congressional District facing opposition from the Oval Office and top Republicans across the country as they look to the 2026 midterm elections as an opportunity to take out a member of their own party in a safe Republican district where they are looking for any and all Republicans to potentially challenge Thomas Massie in his congressional district, as Thomas Massie faces up in opposition to President Trump on a variety of different issues, and most notably as of late, the Politico article published 5 hours ago about 2 House Republicans opposing Mike Johnson's spending plan, as Republicans across Congress look to this with a lot of disdain for Thomas Massie as someone who is a Republican ultimately and has voted party line on a variety of different issues. Thomas Massie has been a thorn in the side of President Trump and his top Republican allies, as he has led the initial charge on the Democratic and Republican side to release the Epstein files, being one of the few Republicans. There are right now only 4 Republicans in the House of Representatives who have signed on to release the Epstein files publicly. Every other Republican has voted to keep that record sealed and will not sign on to this petition here that Thomas Massie is leading the effort here, as we now find that more and more momentum grows to force Donald Trump's Department of Justice to release these files on the national stage. Now, Thomas Massie is someone that Donald Trump has been targeting for quite some time in the 2026 midterms for a multitude of reasons. I've already mentioned a few, but the most notable one as of late is that Thomas Massie actually did not vote for the One Big Beautiful Bill when it came across the Senate and was passed by the Senate, sent to the House of Representatives. Thomas Massie was one of the no votes. And it's not as if Thomas Massie is what many Republicans like to call him as a rhino, Republican in name only. He very much is a conservative who holds a lot of conservative views on a variety of different issues. In fact, he's oftentimes seen as a little bit more to the right on some issues than Donald Trump, but also more libertarian on a variety of others. That leads his overall philosophy being in Congress. Now, Thomas Massie wasn't a recent add-on to the United States Senate. He's not somebody that Donald Trump propelled into power. He was first elected in 2012 to the United States House of Representatives and has been re-elected every year since. His last competitive primary was his first primary for House, where he got 45% of the vote in the Kentucky 4th District to go on to win the general election by nearly 30 points. And since then, he's done quite well. In 2018, he was able to do well in a Democratic strong year, wave year, won by 28 points. In 2020, won by even more. In 2024, also had a Republican primary, but won easily with 76% of the vote. And now it's very much looking like Donald Trump is desperate to get Thomas Massie out of office. When you think about what we've seen here, with all these announcements that Thomas Massie is opposing President Trump and top Republicans on a variety of issues, you might assume that he is set to face a very competitive election. But arguably, not so much. Back in June, Donald Trump launched a political action committee to oust Massie from his seat in Congress and went to a bunch of different Republicans, senior officials associated with Trump, many top Kentucky Republicans, to try to find just anybody to run against him in this state. But they couldn't find it. And a big reason they couldn't find it is because Thomas Massie is still, believe it or not, popular in his district, is responding to the requests of his constituents, and not to mention that there aren't that many talented Republicans to run for office, as many of them have already ran statewide, are in higher office, and don't want to drop down to run for Congress. And so in this era that Trump is in right now, where he just simply can't find a formidable opponent against Thomas Massie, who has been very public to the press, telling President Trump and top Republicans, run against me and you're still going to lose the race, it now looks like Donald Trump wants to drop down one of the Senate candidates that he handed practically everything in the state of Kentucky to have him run for House instead of run for Senate. Now, if you don't know the context on this, in 2023, there was a governor election between Governor Andy Beshear in the state of Kentucky against incumbent Attorney General Daniel Cameron. Daniel Cameron, who was backed by Donald Trump, was the Republican frontrunner and had an immediately cleared field for him on the GOP side, faced up in the general election, easily won this primary with 48% of the vote across the state. In the general election, lost to Democratic Governor Andy Beshear in a state that Donald Trump won in the 2020 election. We can take a look, by 26 points. And 4 years later, Donald Trump would win it by 31 points, and yet Daniel Cameron lost the governor's race. So then he pivoted. In 2026, Mitch McConnell made an announcement that he would not run for re-election. And so it's all of a sudden was decided that Daniel Cameron would run in this race. A mildly competitive race, but still absolutely the front runner. And when you take a look at who, has come out in support of Donald Trump or in favor of Daniel Cameron in this race, you have none other than Donald Trump, who has been backing him in this race for time and time again. And in 2026, it very much seems like Daniel Cameron is on track to win this election in whatever case it might be, against Andy Barr, against Nate Morris. He will likely win this election in the general and in the primary. But Donald Trump desperately wants Thomas Massie out of office. He desperately wants him to be a forgotten thought in the Republican universe, because he has been opposing Trump despite coming from a district that's not a swing. It's not a toss-up. There are no Democrats or independents needed to be pandered to. And yet he is standing on business and firm in his resolve that he is opposed to a lot of the actions from this administration and supports the releasing publicly of the Epstein files that many Republicans have shied away against, as the White House has publicly told these Republicans that they will be seen as enemies of the president if they support the releasing of the Epstein files. Even as Jeffrey Epstein's victims have come to Capitol Hill, Republicans and Democrats who have said publicly that they support releasing the files, the GOP has been opposed, but Thomas Massie has not. And as a result, Donald Trump is angry with him and really does want to pull down Daniel Cameron from this race, because it's not as if the Kentucky Senate race will go any direction but right. It will go towards the Republican Party. It will be a victory for the GOP with or without Daniel Cameron. And Andy Barr, who actually has historically done, interestingly in Kentucky, is potentially the runner-up in this case. But here's the catch here. If Daniel Cameron's out of the race, Andy Barr immediately is on track to be near guarantee that he wins the Senate election in Kentucky. He still has a fighting chance, but Daniel Cameron likely is going to win this race. And thinking about what 2026 might end up with is that if Daniel Cameron really does pull down, it is very possible that Donald Trump does get his way, holding the Senate race in Kentucky, and Daniel Cameron is elected to the United States House of Representatives. But just thinking about, how intense this must be, Donald Trump turning on a member of his own party, going so far as to launching a political action committee, not to elect Republicans, but to remove his own members from office because he doesn't agree with how they vote. Because the House majority is so slim, and every single thing matters. And let's say Republicans are able to gerrymander more states. They've passed Missouri. That's going to be up in the air if it actually is implemented. Indiana's set to likely do it. We might see it in Kansas. Texas has already done it. Florida is still floating with the idea that they might redraw their maps ahead of 2026. All of these different directions that, let's say Democrats flop in 2026, which doesn't look like it's going to happen. But let's say, under the hypothetical, 2026 looks more like it did in 2024, when Republicans saw minor losses but still overall maintained House control. Between 2022 and 2024, Republicans lost on net just 2 seats in Congress. Just 2. But if that maintains itself in 2026, a net loss of 2 seats would give Republicans a 218-seat majority to the Democrats at 217. Which means that of this Republican majority, which right now already with vacancies is exceptionally thin, let's say the majority narrows down 2 seats yet again, and Republicans are relying on this one vote from Thomas Massie to lock in their one big beautiful bill, lock in X, Y, and Z, or they rely on Thomas Massie to block things like the releasing of the Epstein files publicly. These are all things that might be a reality. Let's say Republicans maintain House control, but do so in the same way they did in 2024. If Thomas Massie is still in office, Republicans might be screwed on a variety of different votes. But if they are able to get Daniel Cameron to drop down from the Senate race to run against him, that vote would be a guarantee 1,000% of the time. So this shows exactly why Republicans are so calculated and intentional, why Donald Trump is so adamant that he wants this election to be said and done for, and for a strong Republican to run against him. Because looking at the elections in Kentucky in 2026, we can actually pull them up to see what's happening. in this state. Thomas Massie right now is not set to face a strong primary challenger. And that is what I think really does in this race, that what we've seen thus far, Thomas Massie has received endorsements from Rand Paul, received an endorsement from Elon Musk, and taking a look to the data here shows that the current Republican, who looks like it's going to be, a potential race rematch, rather, of what happened in 2024, Thomas Massie is losing, but there's no clear directive. And when you don't have a clear directive and nobody has announced that they are running in this race yet, it becomes very difficult to see. And so Trump has already asked Daniel Cameron. Daniel Cameron says, I don't want to run for this, but if anyone was to make that ask and to actually land it, it's very possible that it is Donald Trump. Because I am not too old to forget that it was earlier this year that Zach Nunn, U.S. Representative from Iowa's 3rd District, wanted to run for governor, was about to announce. Donald Trump got word of it, called him up and said, your race was won by less than 4 points in 2024. If we want any chance of maintaining the House in 2026, we need incumbency because that benefits you in Iowa and we need you to run. And so Zach Nunn went against his wishes. Instead of run for governor, decided to run for re-election in the House, to which he very well may still lose. But I think this speaks not to the expertise of Trump on the district. I do think to some degree, yes, it shows that Trump cares a lot more about, political, as he did in the first term, but political victories than he does about better governance in a state like Iowa, or maybe worse. I don't know how Zach Nunn would compare to Kim Reynolds. But the point here is that Donald Trump's influence is all-consuming. And even in a state like Kentucky, as much as Daniel Cameron can adamantly say today he will not drop down to run for House tomorrow if Donald Trump goes out on Truth Social and tries to push him out of the race, or in a way kind of forces his hand, and Donald Trump asks him, he says no, well then he says, I will come out and switch my endorsement to Andy Barr in that race. I also remember that it was the Alabama special election, or not special election, regular election, where Donald Trump switched his endorsement from someone he thought would win the primary. They started fading off, switches his endorsement to Katie Britt in the Senate election. Katie Britt goes on to be elected to the U.S. Senate. And so Donald Trump's endorsement, as I said, he is this all-powerful figure in the Republican Party. Thinking about what that might mean is a combination of things. He could force the hand of Daniel Cameron, run up against Thomas Massie, but also he could ask him, and then Daniel Cameron would oblige at that request. But I think this shows that the president's priorities aren't always in line with what the National Party really and desperately needs to maintain dominance in 2026. Right now, Republicans have a trifecta, and the odds at which they lose control of the House the next cycle is nearing 70 to 80%. They still have a fighting chance, but Democrats are absolutely in a better position than Republicans, even with all this redistricting across the country. And as we see what happens in California and in Maryland and in other states that might be pushing back against Donald Trump and the GOP's arguably power grab, where they initiated this entire redistricting process, as it stands right now, Donald Trump's focus should not be a member of his own party. It should not be this, turning his campaign into a political action committee that is standing to try to challenge a sitting Republican. But it also shows he is scared. And that on this issue of voting for the budgetary bills, on voting for the big, beautiful bill, on voting on Epstein, it very much matters a lot to the Oval Office. And they were right. Any support in favor of releasing these files will be seen as something that is egregious and an assault on the White House. And as much as this is something that the overwhelming majority of this nation agrees should happen, the White House does not. Donald Trump does not. And thinking about why that might be, that's not for this video. But what the impacts are on the representatives that are standing by the releasing of the files, on the representatives that push back against a bill that 60 to 70% of this nation disagrees with at its foundation, is that Donald Trump faces them and says, I'm looking to oust you. Because Republicans and Donald Trump have all, and for 10 years now, since Donald Trump's entrance into politics, have been looking for complete and undying loyalty. And Thomas Massie won't offer that. He has not been as much of a thorn in the side of Donald Trump and the Republicans for a long time, and even up until now, this is really a change. But it goes to show how much he is actually, holding up to what he believes in, but also, too, why Donald Trump sees him as so threatening and as someone that is primary target number one on the GOP side. And thinking about how far and to what extreme Donald Trump might go to just get rid of Thomas Massie really goes to show how threatening of a figure he is to the seeming dominance of Donald Trump over his own political party. And it will be fascinating to see if Daniel Cameron budges and drops down to run for House, because it's very clear he does not. But after all, it is entirely up to the president. So thank you guys so much for watching this video. Make sure to comment down suggestions below. Subscribe on the left if you haven't already. And at the top left of the screen, there's also a Discord server for you to go ahead and join. On the screen, there's a video for you to watch and then a playlist for my 2026 Senate election analysis videos. Again, thank you guys so much for watching, and I will see you all later today.